Hello, this is Retro Workshop, and here is episode 7 of my gaming podcast, Nintendo or Sega, Searching for Memories. This episode is entitled Atari, the American Giant. Atari is one of the oldest video game companies in the world, and one of the most groundbreaking in history, for games, arcade machines and consoles. Atari was founded in 1972 by Nolan Bushnell and Ted Tabney, two electrical engineers. Currently it is owned by Atari Interactive, a subsidiary of the French publisher Atari SA. However, the original was founded as Atari Inc. in Sunnyvale, California, and it was a pioneer in arcade games, home video consoles, and home computers. The company's products, such as the tennis-based game Pong and the Atari 2600, helped define the electric entertainment industry from the 1970s to the 1980s. The famous logo was designed by George Opperman, who was Atari's first in-house graphics designer. Opperman designed the logo intending for the silhouette to look like the letter A, as in Atari, and for the two outer prongs to resemble players, and the centre line to be the midline of the tennis court in the company's first big hit, Pong. The company first split in 1984 as a result of the American video game crash of 1983. The arcade division was turned into Atari Games Inc., and the Atari Consumer Electronics Division properties were in turn sold to Trammell Technology Limited, which was renamed to Atari Corporation. It was in 1998 when Hasbro Interactive acquired all Atari Corporation-related properties from JT Storage, which merged a few years earlier, that the company became a new subsidiary, Atari Interactive. It then went into many more hands and was renamed many more times, until landing at Atari SA in 2009, which sought bankruptcy protection under French law in 2013 due to pressures upon the company and difficulty in finding investors. However, before Atari was founded, Nolan and Ed founded another company in 1971 that built the Computer Space, the world's first commercially available arcade video game. A year later, the two incorporated Atari Inc. and hired Al Alcorn as their first design engineer. Bushnell asked Alcorn to produce an arcade version of the Odyssey's tennis game, which would be named Pong. The name Atari itself comes from a term used in the Chinese board game Go. Bushnell chose the term Atari, which references a position in the game of Go when a group of stones is immediately in danger of being taken by one's opponent. The term can be likened to that of check in chess. Its meaning is to hit the target. In 1976, Nolan started development of a flexible console that was capable of playing the 4 existing Atari games. The result was the Atari Video Computer System, which was later renamed 2600 upon release of the 5200. The price was $200, which is the equivalent to $800 2017. It included a console, 2 joysticks, a pair of paddles, and the combat game cartridge. In bringing the machine to market, he looked for investors, since it would be an expensive undertaking. Nolan, in the end, sold Atari to Warner Communications in 1976 for an estimated $28 to $32 million. He then had many arguments with Warner management over the direction of the company, such as the discontinuation of the pinball division that was set up by Joe Keenan with Key Games, and most importantly, the notion of discontinuing the 2600. In 1978, Key Games was disbanded. In December of that year, Nolan was fired following an argument with Manny Gerard. However, Nolan reports that he quit and it was a mutual separation. Development of a successor to the 2600 started as soon as it shipped. The original team estimated the 2600 had a lifespan of about 3 years. Midway into their effort, the home computer revolution took off, leading to the addition of a keyboard and features to produce the Atari 800. The Atari 8-bit family is a series of 8-bit home computers, and its smaller sibling, the 400. The new machines had some success when they finally became available in quantity in 1980. From this platform, Atari released their next-generation console in 1982, the Atari 5200. However, it was unsuccessful due to incompatibility with the 2600 game library, a small library, and notoriously unreliable controllers. Under Warner and Atari's chair and CEO, Raymond Kasher, the company achieved its greatest success, selling millions of 2600s and computers. At its peak, Atari was the fastest growing company in US history at the time. However, the company ran into problems in the early 1980s and was never able to duplicate the success of the 2600. These problems were followed by the American video game crash of 1983, with losses that totaled more than $500 million, and Warner's stock price fell from $60 to $20. Having said all that, Atari still created some more consoles, such as the Atari 7800 1986, Atari Jaguar 1993, and has created a new home console which is to be released in 2019, named the Atari Box. The console was designed primarily to play games from the Atari 2600 via emulation. However, it's also expected to offer a Linux operating environment that will allow users to download and install other compatible games. Atari has also published some excellent games, including Kia Dark Lineage for the PlayStation 2 in 2003, and it's also been the publisher of the Roller Coaster Tycoon series since 2003. Atari helped develop Donkey Kong Jr. and it was released on the Atari computers, and it was also a publisher of some of the Alone in the Dark games, which were originally based on the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. Of course, PacMan, created by Namco, found itself onto almost every Atari system, which helped make the game famous in the early 1980s. Atari is almost single-handedly responsible for the greatest arcade games in history, and was at its peak during the golden age of arcade video games, which led to the rise of video games in other media, such as the 1982 film Tron. The golden age of arcade began with Space Invaders, 1978, and Asteroids, 1979. Asteroids is an arcade space shooter released in the winter of 1979 by Atari and sold over 70,000 arcade cabinets. Asteroids has directly influenced many games and other media, and was heavily imitated. It directly influenced the popular arcade game Defender. The Atari 2600 is still one of the best-selling consoles in history, being ranked 11th on the home console list, selling over 30 million units, outselling a Microsoft console, 3 SEGA consoles, and 3 Nintendo consoles. There are 80 Atari 2600 only games, and most of their notable games come from their own arcades or the 2600. The best Atari games include Pong, Space Race, Breakout, Combat, Starship 1, which had the first Easter egg in any game, this being 2 years before Adventure, Grand Track 10, which may be the first instance of integrated circuit-based read-only memory, which thereafter became the standard for arcade games, Destroyer, Star Raiders, Battlezone, which is sometimes considered the first virtual reality arcade game, Centipede, being one of the most successful games of the Golden Age, Adventure, Star Wars Arcade 1983. This has inspired many world records and was one of the top-selling games of 1983, and iRobot, which was the first arcade game to use 3D polygon graphics. The best games on the list also happen to be some of the most groundbreaking and revolutionary arcade games of all time. The list of original games and the life of the original company were both short but profound in placing the foundations for all arcade games, and it helped define the home console market. Without question, Atari is one of the most significant companies of all time, which stood alongside the Japanese giants. I have been Retro Workshop, and you have been listening to episode 7 of Nintendo or SEGA, Searching for Memories, a gaming podcast where I discuss everything within the enterprise. Thank you.